The Coca-Cola can hit the pavement with a dull thud, splashing sticky, dark brown liquid across the tomb guard's polished leather boots. The crowded Arlington froze, their collective gasp cutting through the summer heat. Caleb Sterling, a 16-year-old in limited edition sneakers, smirked, his state-of-the-art smartphone already recording for the perfect viral clip. He expected a laugh, maybe a flinch from the stone-faced soldier. But Specialist Marcus Vance, the tomb guard, didn't move an inch. His eyes, hidden behind black sunglasses, burned with a fury no one could see. In that moment, a single act of disrespect was about to spark a firestorm that would change a boy, a family, and a nation's understanding of honor. What Caleb didn't know, what no one in that crowd could have guessed, was that the man he mocked carried the weight of a fallen brother, and the tomb he guarded held secrets that would soon unravel everything. It was Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery. The sun was scorching, beating down on a sea of visitors gathered around the tomb of the unknown soldier. The air was thick with heat and reverence, the kind of quiet that settles over a crowd when something sacred is about to happen. Families, veterans, and tourists stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the lone sentinel, pacing with almost mechanical precision. His navy blue uniform was crisp, without a single wrinkle. His kepi hat sat low on his brow, and his sunglasses hid any hint of emotion. Every step, every turn, every click of his heels echoed with purpose. This was Specialist Marcus Vance, a 28-year-old tomb guard, a member of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, and a black man who carried the weight of honor on his shoulders. He was one of the select few chosen for this sacred duty, a living symbol of discipline and devotion. Among the crowd, the Sterling family from California stood out. Richard Sterling, a self-made billionaire and CEO of a luxury supercar corporation, was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his eyes glued to his phone as he fired off emails. His wife, Victoria, idly fanned herself with a cemetery map, her designer sunglasses perched on her nose. Between them stood their 16-year-old son, Caleb. His blonde hair was perfectly sculpted with gel, and his outfit screamed money-limited edition sneakers, a custom t-shirt, and the shiny new phone dangling from his hand. Caleb wasn't here for the ceremony. He was here because his parents thought a trip to D.O. would look good on their social media. But to Caleb, this was just another boring stop on a vacation he didn't want. "This is so lame," Caleb muttered, loud enough for nearby tourists to glance over. "Why are we standing here watching some guy walk back and forth? It's like 100 degrees out here." Victoria sighed, barely looking up from the map. "Caleb, honey, just try to enjoy it. This is important." "Important," Caleb scoffed, scrolling through his phone. "It's just some old tomb. I bet this guy's just a wannabe soldier playing dress-up." His voice dropped slightly, but was still audible to those nearby. "They probably picked him to fill some diversity quota anyway." Richard didn't even look up from his screen. "Let him complain. Victoria, he'll get over it." The crowd hushed as Marcus completed his 21 steps, turned, and faced the tomb. His movements were flawless, a living tribute to the unknown soldiers who gave everything. Marcus had earned this post through years of grueling training, driven by the memory of his older brother, David, who never came home from Iraq. Every step he took was for David, for the fallen, for the country. But Caleb didn't see that. All he saw was a chance to go viral. "I'm gonna get a sick video of this guy," Caleb said, raising his phone. "Bet I can make him flinch." He started recording, narrating loudly. "Yo, check out this robot soldier. Bet he's sweating buckets under that hat." A few tourists shot Caleb dirty looks, but he didn't care. He was used to getting attention. used to his parents smoothing over any trouble he caused. Back home, teachers let him slide, and his friends worshipped his family's wealth. To Caleb, the world was his playground, and rules didn't apply. As Marcus turned for another pass, Caleb's boredom turned to mischief. He spotted the half-empty Coca-Cola can in his hand, a leftover from lunch. A grin spread across his face. "Yo, this is gonna be epic," he whispered to himself. He stepped closer to the rope barrier, ignoring the signs that read, "Please remain behind the railing." The crowd murmured, sensing trouble, but Richard and Victoria were too distracted to notice. With a quick flick of his wrist, Caleb tossed the Coca-Cola can. It landed near Marcus's feet, splashing the sticky liquid onto his polished boots. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that broke the silence. Marcus didn't flinch. His face remained stone, his steps unbroken, but his jaw tightened, just slightly. Years of combat training, years of discipline held him steady. He'd faced worse than a spoiled kid. Enemy fire, roadside bombs, the loss of his brother. But this was a different kind of insult. A public, brazen desecration. Right here, at the place most sacred to him. Caleb laughed louder now, egged on by the crowd's reaction. "Yo, he didn't even blink. This guy's a total statue." He raised his phone again, zooming in on Marcus's boots. "Check out the mess I made. This is going viral for sure." An elderly man in the crowd, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, leaned toward his wife. "That kid's got no respect," he muttered. "Someone needs to teach him a lesson." Caleb, oblivious, kept going. He stepped right up to the rope, leaning over it. "Hey, soldier boy, you gonna clean that up or what? Bet you can't even talk." He turned to the crowd, expecting laughs, but all he got were glares. A mother pulled her kids closer, shielding them from the scene. A group of teenagers whispered, shaking their heads. Finally, Richard looked up from his phone, his expression annoyed by the commotion. "Caleb, what are you doing? Get back here." "Relax, Dad," Caleb said, waving him off. "I'm just having fun. These guys are paid to stand there, right? They work for us." The words hung in the air, heavy and wrong. Marcus's eyes, hidden behind his sunglasses, locked onto Caleb for a split second. He'd heard worse insults in war zones, but this kid's arrogance cut deep. The tomb of the unknown soldier wasn't just a monument. It was a shrine to sacrifice, to men and women who gave their lives without ever knowing fame or fortune. And here was this kid, treating it like a TikTok backdrop. Undeterred, Caleb pulled out his phone again. "Time for the money shot," he said, and then, to everyone's shock, he stepped over the rope barrier. The crowd erupted in murmurs, phones coming out to record. Caleb strutted toward Marcus, holding his phone high for a selfie. "Yo, me and the statue guy. This is gonna get 1 million likes." That was the line. Marcus's training screamed at him to stay still, to ignore the provocation. But something inside him snapped. This wasn't just about him. It was about David. About every soldier who never came home. It was about the honor of the uniform he wore and the sacrifice it represented. And he would not let some arrogant billionaire's kid trample all over it. In one fluid motion, faster than anyone expected, Marcus stepped forward. He didn't grab or shove. His movement was precise, economical, a blur of motion honed by years of training. He snatched the phone from Caleb's hand and with the same unbroken movement, dropped it onto the hard pavement. The crack of the screen shattering echoed like a gunshot in the stunned silence. The crowd froze. Caleb's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. For a moment, he simply stared at the spiderweb of cracks on his device. Then, his face contorted with rage. You broke my phone," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "That's a $3,000 phone. You're going to pay for that. Marcus had already returned to his post, his face unreadable, his posture perfect. But the air had changed. The spell of solemnity was broken, replaced by a buzzing, electric tension. Whispers erupted through the crowd, some cheering quietly, others stunned into silence. Security guards, led by Chief Officer Amelia Reed, were already pushing through the onlookers. Reed, a no-nonsense officer with 2 decades of service at Arlington, spoke into her shoulder radio, her voice calm but firm. "We have a situation at the tomb. A civilian crossed the line. The sentinel has responded." Richard Sterling stormed forward, his face crimson. "This is an outrage. That soldier assaulted my son and destroyed his property. I'm calling my lawyer. Do you have any idea who I am?" Reed raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Sir, I know exactly what happened. Your son threw a projectile at a federal officer on duty, verbally harassed him, and then trespassed across a restricted barrier. In this jurisdiction, that constitutes assault and trespassing on federal property. Frankly, you're lucky the Sentinel didn't do more." "He's a child," Victoria shrieked, clutching her designer purse as if it were a life raft. "You can't treat him like a criminal." "Ma'am," Reed said, her eyes like chips of ice, "age doesn't grant a license to desecrate a national shrine. This is a sacred place, and your son just defiled it." Caleb, still staring at his shattered phone, finally looked up. For the first time, he saw the faces in the crowd not as an audience, but as a jury. He saw anger, disgust, cold disappointment. A group of veterans stood nearby, their arms crossed, their gazes hard as steel. One of them, a woman in her 60s with a Marine Corps pin on her lapel, shook her head slowly. "I buried my husband not 50 yards from here," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the tense air. "You should be ashamed." The hashtag Arlington Brat was already trending. Clips of Caleb's stunt and Marcus's swift response were exploding across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. News vans were en route, and the story was hitting national headlines: "Billionaire's son disrespects tomb of the unknown soldier." Reed turned to her team. "Escort the family to the security office. Now." Richard protested, sputtering about his rights and his connections, but the guards were firm and unyielding. They led the Sterlings away as the crowd parted, some snapping photos, others muttering about spoiled rich kids and the justice they deserved. As he was led away, Caleb looked back one last time. Marcus had resumed his march. His boots were still stained with Coca-Cola, but his focus was absolute, his presence a silent, immovable testament to the honor Caleb had tried to mock. Inside the security office, a small, air-conditioned room, lined with photos of Arlington's storied history, the Sterlings sat across from Chief Reed and Colonel Elizabeth Warren, the commanding officer of Marcus's unit. Colonel Warren was a woman in her 50s, forged from granite and resolve, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and a gaze that could cut through steel. She did not mince words. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice low and dangerous, "your son committed multiple federal offenses today. He assaulted an active-duty soldier and desecrated a national monument." She leaned forward slightly. "This isn't a playground. This isn't a backdrop for social media clout. The tomb represents every American soldier who gave their life for this country without ever receiving a name, a headstone, or a proper burial. Your son treated it like a circus." Richard, his businessman instincts kicking in, tried to regain control. "Look, Colonel, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. The boy got carried away. I am prepared to write a substantial check to the cemetery fund for the damages. Let's just keep this quiet." Colonel Warren's eyes narrowed into slits. "This has never been about money, Mr. Sterling. It's about a complete and utter lack of respect. It's about the arrogance of believing your wealth puts you above the principles this nation was built on. Your son needs to learn that actions have consequences, no matter how many supercars his father sells." She paused, her eyes flicking to the photos on the wall. "That tomb represents men like my father, who was listed as missing in action in Vietnam for 30 years. You think a check can quiet that?" Victoria clutched her husband's arm, her face pale. "He's only 16, he didn't mean any harm." "He knew exactly what he was doing," Reed interjected flatly. "And judging by your immediate reaction to try and buy your way out of it, I can see where he learned it from." Caleb slumped in his chair, his bravado completely gone. The weight of the situation was finally crashing down on him. His phone, his digital lifeline, was in pieces. The entire world was watching, and for the first time in his life, they weren't on his side. He felt small, exposed, and terrified. The PR nightmare was already in full swing. Richard's phone vibrated incessantly with calls from his board of directors. News alerts showed his company's stock was taking a nosedive. Victoria's social media was a toxic wasteland of hateful comments, forcing her to deactivate her accounts. The Sterling Empire, built on an image of prestige and power, was cracking under the weight of one stupid video. Colonel Warren stood up, her decision made. "Your son is facing serious federal charges. Assaulting a soldier at a national shrine can carry significant prison time, even for a juvenile." She let the words hang in the air, the threat suffocating. "However," she continued, "I am a soldier, not just an administrator. I believe in discipline, but also in education. There might be an alternative to prosecution." Richard and Victoria looked up, a desperate glimmer of hope in their eyes. "But it will be far more difficult than writing a check," the colonel said, her expression leaving no room for negotiation. "And it will not be pleasant." Colonel Warren leaned back in her chair, the leather groaning under the weight of her authority. "Instead of a federal courtroom, your son's trial will take place here, at Arlington. For the next 30 days, he will be assigned to a mandatory service and education program." Richard Sterling's face, which had been pale with fear, now flushed with indignation. "You can't be serious. A month. We have a trip to Monaco planned. My son is not a common laborer." "He is now," Colonel Warren stated, her voice flat and final. "He will surrender his phone, wallet, and designer clothes. He will be issued work fatigues. His day will start at 0500 hours and end when the ground supervisor says it does. He will scrub latrines, polish headstones, pull weeds, and learn the story behind every single one. He will meet the Gold Star families who come here to grieve. He will look them in the eye and understand what his joke was truly aimed at. This is not a negotiation, Mr. Sterling. It is his only alternative to a criminal record that will follow him for the rest of his life." For the first time, Richard Sterling was speechless. His power, his money, meant nothing in this room. He looked at Caleb, whose face was a mask of pure terror. The vacation was over. The real world had just arrived. The next 4 weeks were a brutal awakening. Caleb traded his custom t-shirts for a simple work shirt and jeans. His alarm was the stern voice of his supervisor, a grizzled former master sergeant named Frank Miller, a man who had lost his leg in Fallujah and had no patience for teenage angst. The first week, Caleb complained endlessly, his hands blistering, his back aching. The other groundskeepers, all veterans, ignored him. To them, he was just another stain on the cemetery's honor, one they were forced to endure. One sweltering afternoon, as Caleb was painstakingly cleaning a row of headstones, Sergeant Miller limped over. "You think this is a punishment?" Miller grunted, gesturing to the sea of white marble. "This is a privilege." He pointed to a specific stone. See that name, Corporal Evans? He was 19, took a bullet meant for me, died in my arms while talking about the Ford Mustang he was gonna buy when he got home. He was barely older than you. Caleb stopped scrubbing, his usual sarcasm gone. Miller's story wasn't like a movie, it was real, raw, and heavy. The turning point came during the third week. Miller assigned Caleb to assist a group of volunteers preparing for a memorial service. He watched an elderly woman in a wheelchair, her hands trembling, place a single white rose on a grave. She looked up at Caleb, her eyes clouded with a grief that was decades old but still sharp. "My brother," she whispered, "he was a pilot. He loved to fly." She didn't say it with anger, only a profound sadness. In that moment, Caleb didn't see a tombstone. He saw a brother, a pilot, a life cut short. He finally felt a deep, gut-wrenching shame. On the final day of his program, Colonel Warren arranged a meeting. Caleb, dressed in his work clothes, sat in the same security office. Across from him sat Specialist Marcus Vance, out of uniform, in simple civilian attire. His presence was just as commanding. Caleb's stomach churned. He looked Marcus directly in the eye. "Specialist Vance," he began, his voice steady but quiet. "I'm sorry. There's no excuse for what I did. I was an arrogant jerk. I didn't see you as a person. I saw you as a prop for a stupid video." He took a breath. "And what I said about the quota, it was a disgusting thing to say. It was wrong. I was wrong." Marcus studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "My brother, David, was a captain in the army. He died in Iraq when I was your age. He was the smartest, bravest man I ever knew. He earned his rank, his respect, every single day. He taught me that the uniform doesn't see color. It only sees duty." He leaned forward. "I guard that tomb for him, for all the ones who didn't come home. When you threw that can, when you said what you said, you weren't just disrespecting a soldier. You were disrespecting his memory. You were disrespecting everything he died for." Caleb's eyes stung with tears. He didn't try to hide them. "I understand that now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't take it back, but I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the lesson you taught me." Marcus nodded slowly. "Good. Admitting you're wrong is the start. Living it is the hard part." He stood and extended his hand. Caleb stood and shook it. The grip was firm, real. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an acknowledgement, a chance. The story of the Arlington brat didn't just fade away, it changed. News outlets picked up the story of Caleb's 30 days of service, transforming it from a tale of entitlement into one of redemption. Shaken by the public humiliation and their son's profound change, Richard and Victoria Sterling started the largest private scholarship fund in the country for children of fallen soldiers. Marcus Vance continued his silent, steadfast duty at the tomb, his boots polished, his steps precise, a guardian of the fallen. The shattered phone was never replaced, but what Caleb Sterling gained humility, respect, and an understanding of a world far bigger than himself was priceless. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood as it always had, a silent, powerful reminder that some things are sacred, and some lessons, learned the hard way, change you forever. Thank you for following this story. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. If you'd like more inspiring stories about justice and resilience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll be back tomorrow with another must-see story you won't want to miss.